Welcome back. We're going to dig a little deeper into the New York Times story about President Trump and Russia. Frankly, we think it deserves an explainer. So with me now are Michael Schmidt, one of the reporters who broke the story about the FBI's counterintelligence investigation into whether Mr. Trump, as sitting president, was working as an agent for Russia. We also have Ben Wittes. He's an NBC News legal analyst and he's the editor-in-chief of the National Security Blog Lawfare, and he actually worked with Mr. Schmidt on this story. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. So, Michael, walk us through the piece here. The designation is a counterintelligence investigation. We've always thought of the Comey firing and the Mueller aspect as simply obstruction of justice, as sort of separate, but we're calling it counterintelligence, and it's a bit confusing. Why?
So it was a two-pronged investigation. It had a criminal aspect. Did the president break the law in trying to obstruct the investigation, interfere with it? And this other Russia question. And it's important, as you said, because our collective understanding was much narrower. It was just on obstruction. Did the president break the law there? And now we know that it was far broader. It had national security concerns. The FBI was afraid that the firing of Comey was a way to help the Russians stop the FBI from figuring out what they did in the election.
Is this still a counterintelligence investigation into whether Mr. Trump himself is acting as a Russian agent? Is that what the Mueller probe inherited?
We know the Mueller probe inherited it. We know the Mueller probe has spent an enormous amount of time trying to figure out what the president has done in office in regards to the investigation, his interference with it. They've talked to all these White House officials. Do we know if there is still this belief and aspect that the president is working for the Russians? I can't answer that.
All right, Ben, this was all the sort of the nut of this scoop by the Times was based on testimony by now a former FBI General Counsel, James Baker. And this is what he told Congress, and this was in the New York Times story, about why they viewed it as counterintelligence. He said this: not only would it be an issue of obstructing an investigation, but the obstruction itself would hurt our ability to figure out what the Russians had done, and that is what would be the threat to national security. It led you to write that the collusion question and the obstruction question are now the same thing. Collusion is obstruction and vice versa. Explain.
Well, so as Mike just described, we had sort of thought of the obstruction investigation as this kind of separate criminal investigation that arose at the time of the firing. In other words, that you had this underlying election interference investigation going on, the so-called collusion investigation. Then the president comes along and kneecaps the investigation by firing the FBI director. And a few weeks later, we learn that Bob Mueller is investigating whether that's obstruction of justice, i.e. a crime. The significance of Mike's and Adam Goldman's story is that it forces you to reimagine how the FBI understood what it was doing, which, as Mike just said, and as the quote that you read from Jim Baker reflects, was we had this investigation for national security reasons of Russian activity. Then somebody on the U.S. side, i.e. the President of the United States, took some action that kind of looks like they're trying to shut down the investigation. That raises national security concerns about whether we will be able to find out what the Russians were doing, whether we will be able to stop what the Russians were doing. So the Bureau appears to have understood what happened in terms of whether the president was working with the Russians. That's a very different thing, and it collapses the obstruction inquiry into that larger collusion inquiry.
So, Michael, it made me think of another scoop of yours about, I want to say, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, where you had Rod Rosenstein supposedly saying, should I wear a wire, talking about the 25th Amendment. And the question is, was he serious? Was that just sarcasm? When you open a counterintelligence investigation on the President of the United States, you have an FBI is going to get sign-off from the Justice Department. One would assume it came from Rod Rosenstein, since he was overseeing it. But is that where this may have come from when they're trying to figure out, should I wear a wire? Were they trying to figure out, how do you investigate the sitting President of the United States?
They were struggling with that. And these two stories take us inside and let us see what the FBI and the Justice Department were looking at in this critical period of time, a little more than a week in May of 2017. Comey has just been fired. The FBI thinks there could be this huge threat coming from them. Rosenstein had just provided Trump with a rationale for firing Comey that wasn't Trump's rationale.
Right.
So the FBI is looking at Rosenstein, who's overseeing the investigation, skeptically.
So they were not trusting him at that time.
He had just provided
Wow.
an incorrect or a not what the president's rationale was for the firing, and he's supposed to be overseeing the investigation. So they're sitting there. They know there's this larger investigation into Russia. They know there are these questions about the election, and they are struggling to figure out what to do. And it is in that context that they open this investigation.
All right, legally, the obstruction question has always been you can't indict a sitting president. Maybe they can't even interview him about his actions as a sitting president. But if it's part of a counterintelligence, does that give Mueller a better shot at subpoenaing the president and having it being upheld?
So I don't think it affects the likelihood that a subpoena would have legs one way or the other. I do think it should profoundly condition our expectations of what Mueller's report is going to look like.
Meaning?
So
Much more damning?
Well, much more of a continuous story, as in the Russians did this stuff to influence the election, and here are all the things that we investigated on the U.S. side that may have been done in support of that. People lying, people doing X, Y, and Z, president trying to shut down our investigation. I think it provides a through narrative potentially to the report that is potentially quite profound.
All right, Michael Schmidt, Ben Wittes, appreciate you trying to help us out here. I think basically now, instead of Trump as the hub and everything else is the spoke, Russia's the hub, Trump's the spoke.
It was
And
about
that's,
Russia, full stop.
There it is. Thank you, guys. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.